A stuntman gets thrown from a moving train, and the body that lands in the grass first isn't him. It's a dummy left in frame while the real stuntman rolls in from the opposite direction, alive, in that exact same shot, seconds apart.
Everybody just jumped back. They couldn't believe it.
Two bodies, one person. Nobody in the editing room ever caught it. It aired exactly like that, uncut. And it's been sitting inside this beloved family show for over 40 years, unnoticed by almost everyone who's ever watched it. If a mistake this big slipped through untouched, you have to wonder what else did. Mistakes that aired. That train scene from the Season 5 episode, The Odyssey, is the clearest example, but it's far from the only one. Once you know where to look, this show is full of moments that should have been fixed and never were. Take Laura's pregnancy storyline. According to Melissa Gilbert herself, along with fan historians who've tracked the timeline episode by episode, Laura was visibly pregnant for well over a year of in-show time, announced in one warm season, and somehow still expecting by the following summer. Then there's the episode that features Colonel Sanders. Yes, that Colonel Sanders of Kentucky Fried Chicken. In a Season 8 episode called Wave of the Future, Nellie's restaurant gets swallowed up by a franchise deal, and the fictional Colonel Sanders shows up offering a competing chicken franchise to another character entirely. One problem, the real Colonel Sanders wasn't even born until 1890, and KFC itself didn't exist until 1952, more than half a century after this show is supposed to be set. Somehow, that slipped through every round of notes, every screening, every broadcast standards check, and went out to millions of homes untouched. If you're the kind of person who likes catching things other people miss, this is exactly the sort of thing worth sticking around for. So if that's you, go ahead and hit subscribe now, because there's a lot more hiding in this show than one anachronistic chicken franchise. The visual sloppiness goes even deeper. In at least 2 episodes, The Monster of Walnut Grove and The Music Box, you can hear tree branches rustling loudly outside a bedroom window, as if a storm is blowing through outside. Except, there's no tree anywhere near that house in any other scene of the series. It's almost certainly recycled stock footage or a stray sound effect, slotted in and never double-checked against what the set actually looked like. Watch for the family quilt too, a mostly white piece with a pattern close to a double wedding ring design. And you'll notice it migrating from bed to bed throughout the show, turning up in the Olsen's house, the Ingalls house, and beyond. Evidence that costume and prop pieces were being reused far more liberally than anyone at home was ever meant to notice. Clothing slips through the cracks too. Caroline Ingalls appears in a bra in more than one episode, despite the fact that the modern bra wasn't even invented until 1912. Several of the women sport tight, bouncy perms that read far more 1970s than 1880s. And Melissa Gilbert has openly admitted her own hair was frequently too long, too styled, and too modern for the frontier girl she was playing. And then there's the finale. The last farewell is set in 1901, over a decade past the events of the previous season. Laura's own voiceover had placed the story in the spring of 1887, just one season earlier. By 1901, most of the adult cast should have aged into their 60s. The children from those later seasons, Carrie, Jenny, Nancy, James, Cassandra, should have grown into full adults by then too. The real Charles Ingalls died just a year after that timeline, in 1902. Yet nobody on screen looks a day older. It's as if the entire town of Walnut Grove simply stopped aging the moment the finale began. A mistake so large, it's almost funny that nobody flagged it before broadcast. There's a smaller version of this same problem buried in a made-for-TV movie involving the character, Albert. One storyline strongly implies he died. Another, later episode casually mentions he grew up to become Walnut Grove's town doctor. Fans have picked at that contradiction for years, and Melissa Gilbert herself was once asked to settle it on camera. Her answer, delivered with a straight face, Albert really did die, and came back as the town zombie doctor. It's a joke, but it's also the show in miniature, a contradiction nobody bothered to resolve until a fan forced the issue decades later. The friendship disguised as a feud. If the bloopers are what slipped through by accident, this next one was deliberate. A lie the show told on purpose, for 9 straight years. Laura Ingalls and Nellie Oleson were built to be enemies on screen, trading insults across Walnut Grove episode after episode. Off-screen, Melissa Gilbert and Allison Arngrim were about as close as two people can be, They had sleepovers. They pranked people together. They spent nearly every spare hour side by side, convincing an entire national audience that they hated each other while being each other's best friend in real life is its own kind of performance, one that rarely gets any credit. That closeness had an edge to it, though. Later in the series, Nellie married a character named Percival, played by actor Steve Tracy, who, in real life, was gay, and one of Arngrim's closest friends. That didn't stop the two of them from turning their scripted romance into a running joke aimed squarely at Melissa Gilbert. Whenever they got the chance, Tracy and Arngrim would draw their kissing scenes out as long as they possibly could, purely to fluster her, because at the time, Gilbert was a genuinely nervous teenager, still working out how she felt about screen intimacy at all. That discomfort had real roots. Gilbert was only 15 when she filmed her first on-screen kiss opposite Dean Butler's Almanzo Wilder. And it was also her first real kiss, period, with Butler being 23 at the time. The age gap left her rattled enough that she went straight to Michael Landon, who wasn't just a co-star, but a director on the show, and by then, something close to a father figure. Landon took it straight to the producers, who agreed to soften the scene, swapping the kiss for a simple peck on the cheek. It's easy to laugh at the make-out marathon prank Tracy and Arngrim pulled, but it lands differently once you realize how young and how genuinely unprepared Gilbert actually was for any of it. What was poured on set? If Walnut Grove ran on lemonade and hard work in the show, the real set ran on something considerably stronger. By multiple accounts, the crew reportedly went through 2 full 30 packs of beer on an average filming day. The especially grueling shoots earned their own nickname, 3-case days. This wasn't hidden away somewhere. It was simply part of how the production functioned, day in and day out. According to Melissa Gilbert's own memoir, the heaviest drinker on set was Michael Landon himself. His mornings reportedly began with coffee spiked with liquor, and the drinking continued quietly through the rest of the day. For a long time, most people around him had no real sense of the scale of it. He was good at keeping it hidden. Eventually, though, the pattern became impossible to miss, and the full extent of what he'd been carrying came into view for the people closest to him. It's a strange thing to sit with. The actor playing the steady moral center of an entire American family was privately unraveling in a way the show never once acknowledged. A faith he didn't practice. Charles Ingalls, the character Landon played, often spoke in explicitly Christian terms, anchoring entire episodes around faith and scripture. The man underneath the role told a very different story. Michael Landon was born Eugene Maurice Orowitz, and he was Jewish, a detail quietly at odds with the character most audiences still associate him with. He grew up between New York and New Jersey. His father, Eli Maurice Orowitz, was Jewish, while his mother, Peggy O'Neill, practiced Catholicism. Landon later described himself as identifying with his father's cultural heritage, though he didn't personally subscribe to any single organized religion. He believed in God in a broad sense, but his relationship to Judaism was cultural far more than devotional. He never seemed to view playing a devout Christian patriarch as any kind of contradiction. It was simply another layer of a role he wore completely on camera, while living something entirely different once filming stopped for the day. Even his signature curls weren't what they appeared to be. That thick, dark head of hair audiences knew so well came from a bottle. His real hair was closer to a muted ash brown. He took the illusion seriously enough to see a professional colorist regularly, and even then, as gray started creeping in underneath, studio lighting and natural sun would occasionally push the dye into an odd, purplish tint on camera, forcing the production to call in extra colorists just to fix it before anyone at home noticed. More than it got credit for. For a series so often remembered as gentle, Little House on the Prairie tackled far more than nostalgia. It took on sexual assault, drug addiction, racism, prejudice, adoption, and disability, at a time when almost no other family program dared go near any of it. In a strange way, the show's wholesome reputation gave it cover to push storylines further than audiences ever expected from primetime television. A reputation that, decades later, still masks just how much ground it actually covered. The sisters who never made peace. Not every on-screen relationship survived contact with real life. Mary and Laura Ingalls were written as close, devoted sisters, but the actresses playing them, Melissa Sue Anderson and Melissa Gilbert, reportedly couldn't stand each other. The tension between them ran deep enough that other cast members avoided getting caught in the middle, and it lasted the entire 9-year run of the show. Nearly a decade spent working side by side with someone you genuinely can't stand. In her memoir, Prairie, Gilbert didn't soften her account, describing Anderson as cold and unfriendly. Anderson has never publicly offered her side of it, so the story remains one-sided to this day. Other crew members have echoed similar impressions of her demeanor, though some have speculated her sheltered upbringing under a famously protective mother may explain the distance more than any real animosity. Either way, it's a rift that, as far as anyone knows, was never repaired. Family ties didn't always hold up better off-screen either. Jonathan Gilbert, who played Nellie's younger brother Willie, was in real life Melissa Gilbert's adopted brother. The two were close during filming, but by most accounts they became estranged after the show ended. Jonathan eventually left acting behind for finance, becoming a stockbroker in New York, while Melissa stayed in the industry, later serving as president of the Screen Actors Guild, and, in 2016, running for a congressional seat in Michigan before health complications forced her to withdraw. The prankster behind the Prairie bonnet. Not everything behind the scenes ran on tension. Michael Landon had a well-earned reputation as the set's biggest instigator, known for stunts like covering a toilet in plastic wrap and waiting for the fallout. According to Rachel Greenbush, who played youngest daughter Carrie, Landon was, in her words, a genuine practical joker at heart. She and Melissa Gilbert would sneak off to a nearby creek during breaks to catch frogs, then bring their finds back to set and hand them over to Landon, who would, without missing a beat, place the frog in his own mouth, walk up to an unsuspecting cast or crew member, open wide, and let it leap out, sending whoever was nearby into a genuine panic. It was silly, a little gross, and by every account, deeply loved by everyone who worked there. The reconciliation nobody expected of everything that happened off camera. The relationship between Melissa Gilbert and Michael Landon may be the one that's hardest to reduce to a single label, because it was never just one thing. When Gilbert was 11, she lost her adoptive father. She was told at the time it was a stroke. Once she was cast as Laura Ingalls, she found herself gravitating toward Landon as a genuine father figure, and the two grew close enough that he reportedly told her he loved her the way he'd love a daughter. Then it broke. When Landon left his wife to pursue a relationship with Cindy Clerico, a makeup artist working on the show, Gilbert, who had already lived through her own parents' divorce at 8, felt deeply betrayed, and she cut off contact with him completely. For a long stretch, the closeness they had built simply didn't exist anymore, but it didn't end there. Gilbert eventually chose to let go of the resentment, and the two reconciled before it was too late. When Landon was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, she came back into his life and stayed through his final chapter. After he passed away in 1991, she named one of her own children Michael in memory of him, a quiet, permanent way of holding on to what that relationship had ultimately become. Long we see, after the anger had faded. The man behind it. Landon wasn't just the star of Little House on the Prairie, he was, in nearly every meaningful sense, its architect. Before this show, he'd already spent 14 years as a familiar face on the Western series Bonanza, alongside actors like Lorne Greene and Dan Blocker. That experience made him the obvious choice when NBC producer Ed Friendly brought him on, not just to star as Charles Ingalls, but to direct the original 2-hour pilot. From there, his fingerprints were everywhere. He appeared in nearly every episode across the first 8 seasons, while producing the series behind the scenes, before eventually stepping back from acting altogether to focus on production for the final season, retooled as Little House, A New Beginning. In total, he directed 90 of the show's 204 episodes and personally wrote the storylines for both the pilot and the finale. Allison Arngrim has described his directing style as demanding but warm, a personality many on set called magnetic. Someone who could push a scene hard and still have the whole crew laughing 5 minutes later. In a 2018 television interview, Arngrim recalled how Landon once welcomed a nervous guest star onto set with one of his signature pranks, easing the tension with humor before a single line was even filmed. He died from pancreatic cancer at 54, and by nearly every account, that same warmth and mischief were exactly what people remembered most. A real town called Walnut Grove. Here's something that still surprises longtime fans. Walnut Grove isn't a fictional backdrop. It's a real town in Redwood County, Minnesota, founded in 1874 and incorporated in 1879. Laura Ingalls Wilder, who wrote the original books, genuinely spent part of her childhood there between roughly 1874 and 1876, before her family moved on to other stretches of the Midwest that later found their way into her stories. As of 2019, the actual town had a population of only around 600 people, tucked into roughly 1 square mile. A place so small it's almost hard to believe it inspired a series watched by millions, let alone one that turned a quiet farming community into a household name for generations of viewers who never once set foot in Minnesota. Where everyone ended up. Karen Grassel, who played Caroline Ingalls, kept acting after the show ended, appearing in projects like Harry's War and Wyatt Earp, and remains connected to film work today, even though her net worth sits modestly compared to other television veterans of her era. Melissa Gilbert's own financial path has had real ups and downs, shaped partly by the health complications that cut short her run for Congress. A chapter of her life that took her from the Ingalls family farm all the way to a genuine campaign for the U.S. House of Representatives. Lindsay and Sidney Greenbush, who together played Carrie, are reported to hold a combined net worth in the low millions. None of it comes close to what Michael Landon left behind, reportedly between $8 and $10 million to each of his 9 children, arranged deliberately to head off any disputes before they could start. A final act of planning from a man who spent his whole career making sure every detail was accounted for, on screen and off. Keep looking. Look again at any of it. The frog gags, the secret drinking, the mismatched quilts, the sister who never spoke to her sister. And the pattern is always the same. Behind every scene that looks simple, someone was carrying something the cameras never picked up. Run the tape back one more time, past the dummy in the grass and the stuntman rolling in beside it, and you'll notice the whole show was built this way. Careful on the surface, messy underneath, and never quite as edited as it looked. So the next time an old episode comes on, don't just watch it, look closer. You'll be surprised what was sitting there the entire time. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this one, subscribe to the channel and check out another one of our videos before you go.